It's time for the Financial Crisis Talk Center with Ken Gross and David Einstandig from Thav Gross.
Credit card debt is number one. I view it as financial cancer.
40% of your gross income is going to just pay the debt service. You got no chance of getting out.
I would give up my credit score to get rid of debt.
Here's your host, Ken Gross.
Welcome to the Financial Crisis Talk Center. It is morning time and time for reality. Co-host with me this morning, Brian Small. I almost called you David Einstandig. Good to see you, Brian.
No. There is a significant difference. While he is thinning at the top, he is not bald yet.
This is very true. Also with us in the studio, Trevor Cruz, our Lansing GM. Good to see you, Trevor.
Thank you, Ken. Good to be with you today.
All right, we are going to talk reality today. And part of it is I went and I did it. I like to sometimes just do the basics. I go to the dictionary. Actually, nobody goes to the dictionary anymore. I go to Google and I go reality definition. Here's your definition. The world or the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or national idea of them.
Notional.
Thank you, Trevor. Trevor read the outline. This is good to see, Brian. A little tip for you. Trevor, you passed. You can stay for the rest of the show.
Yes.
We're changing the name of the show. This is a big announcement. It's not happening this week. It's going to happen mid-July. Next show, we'll announce the firm date. But we're going to change the name of the show from Financial Crisis Talk Center to Law and Reality. And the whole focus on the change is to not just talk law, but talk about legal issues in the context of reality. What does it really mean? What is the solution to the problem? Sometimes you can get into this esoteric theory of talking about a case like In Re Hurtado or something like that lawyers sometimes do, and they start bantering back and forth about a theory. But really what you always have to do when it comes down to the client and coming up to a solution to a problem is you need to come up with the reality. The right set of circumstances dictates an approach. Sometimes it's pursuant to that legal theory. Sometimes it's pursuant to practicality.
Absolutely. You've got an opportunity here, and we're looking at the law in a different way, where we're going to take a look and say, all right, here's what the law says a lot of times, and here's how it impacts you. And then once it impacts you is how should you pursue it? Because it doesn't always pay to be right is the true part of the answer. It pays to be really right, and reality has everything to do with it.
You want to make it work. So when we switch over to law and reality, I'm going to shave my head and become bald. Brian's going to have a full head of hair. Trevor will have to figure out what we're going to do with you, and we'll have to figure out what we're going to do with David Einstandig, just to kind of switch things around. The format of the show will change a little bit. Things will be announced as we go forward, but we're still going to keep the essence of what we do with Financial Crisis Talk Center. It just, I think the name's gotten a little bit old. People are still in financial crisis, but I would have to say on a global basis for the U.S. and for Michigan, the financial crisis is about, I think it's time to let that go and just deal with reality. The reality is this. If you're sitting with $50,000 of credit card debt, I don't care if you make $300,000 a year or $200,000 or $50,000 a year, you should get rid of that credit card debt because you're paying $10,000 a year in interest. You're earning $15,000 a year before tax to do it, and you should be putting that money away for retirement so that when you get to 65 and 70, you've got $500,000 or $1 million to retire off of, rather than look back and say, I spent 45 years paying $10,000 a year of juice to the credit card companies for which I got nothing for it.
Except a good credit score.
Yeah, except a good credit score.
Well, it comes down to this. When we get to reality, right now we're going to be talking about our new reality, the reality of after the Great Recession that was almost a depression.
Very true. All right, so that's enough of the reality. Let's deal with a reality situation. I'm going to take my favorite couple, Mike and Rita, and I'm going to give you a fact pattern, and we're going to walk through how, in this particular case, the solution to their problem fits within the confines of a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and there's also a tax problem twist to this along the way. So
Ken, before you give the facts, I just want to point out, most people think when you file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you have to be broke. You can't have anything left. You can't have money in the bank. You can't have assets. And this example that we're about to go through shows just the opposite.
We should have like drum roll music for that, like a beat going on the show, because here are the facts, and that was a good lead-in, Brian. Rita happens to be a physician assistant. She's making $90,000 a year. But last year, Mike, he was forced to close his landscaping and snow removal service after several years. All right, so Mike is on the rebound now. He's working for a friend's construction company as a supervisor, and he's making $40,000 a year. But he lost his business last year; it closed down. So between Mike and Rita, they're making $130,000 a year. That's an important number to think about. They're not destitute, just like you said, Brian. They have income. But let's see how this works out with their debts. Now, here's their situation with their house. Their house is worth $65,000. Let me give you an example for their house. Suppose Mike and Rita happen to be living in Redford. Now, I don't want to pick Redford, but I was running through some numbers yesterday on Zillow. The most underwater city in metropolitan Detroit is Redford. 65.1% of the homes are underwater still in Redford. They got hammered by the financial crisis and the real estate bubble burst. So the fair market value of this home is $65,000. First mortgage $110,000. Second mortgage $25,000. They have tax debt. Mike has payroll taxes owed of $20,000 from the landscaping business that shut down, and they're behind in their income taxes. Their income tax liability is for 2008 and 9. They owe $75,000. 2010, $15,000. 2011 and 12 combined, another $15,000. They've got credit card debt. Personal credit card debt, use of the cards, $20,000. Business credit card debt from Mike's business, $100,000. So they have $130,000 of income, but they've got a boatload of debt between tax debt and credit card debt. 2 car loans, $30,000, and they have some assets. They got $10,000 cash in the bank, and Rita has $100,000 in her 401k. So that's the scene. So you've got a couple. Everything was going okay for them, except the landscaping business fell apart. He got behind in payroll taxes. They also fell behind on their income taxes. They're making $130,000 going forward. They still have $100,000 in their 401k. They got $10,000 in cash. They've got a lot of credit card debt. What do? They've come into the office. They're meeting with Brian and Trevor. Actually, they started off meeting with me, and I said to him, you know what? I want to bring Brian into this because I happen to think that this case is right for a Chapter 7. Right off the bat, they say to me, well, I heard that you can't discharge taxes in a bankruptcy. That's not necessarily true, and we're going to cover the taxes in a moment. But let's start with question number 1. There's this thing called the means test, Brian, that I hear about.
Which I always call the mean test.
The mean test about whether you have the means. And if you have the means, which means if you have too much income, there's a rule that says you don't get to go through the Chapter 7 door. You get stuck going through the Chapter 13 or Chapter 11 door. What is that means test? And then we have to say, is there an exception to it?
I'll give
we
you
got 30 seconds.
The quick answer is the means test is a series of standards applied to your income that the government has set forth that says that if you subtract from your income these allowed standards and there's money left over, you're not going to qualify for a Chapter 7 bank.
That was the complicated answer. If you have too much income, you're not going to qualify for a Chapter 7 income, and $130,000 could be a problem.
Tax problems are major problems. Don't let the IRS levy your wages and seize your assets. There is a solution.
We're Thav Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
If you're behind on your taxes and owe money to the IRS, call Thav Gross.
We've been solving tax problems for 32 years. We stop wage levies, resolve unfiled returns, and obtain the best possible settlements.
Call Thav Gross today, 888-235-HELP.
You like your job, What you don't like is the way your boss has been treating you. He's making comments about how you look instead of your work, and he's been touching you inappropriately. If you complain, is he allowed to fire you? Absolutely not. Unwelcome sexual comments, advances, and contact are illegal in the workplace. Make him pay. Gold Star Law is here to help you through your employment law problem, whatever it is.
Gold Star Law, protecting employees' rights. Call 1-800-WAGES-10 for a free consultation today.
Every family has the family meeting, and we all know what that means. Dad's got dementia. What are we going to do? What's the care plan that the family has in place? Usually they don't, or they struggle with a care plan. When you go home tonight and you talk to your tax person and you talk to your financial person, say, what's the plan that you have in place? And as soon as they don't give you an answer, give me a call, because I can do it for you.
All right, welcome back. We're talking about Mike and Rita, and we're running through a Chapter 7 example of how it can resolve their financial problems even though they have $130,000 worth of income. Right when we went to the break, the first issue was this means test that I was talking about with Brian, and how the means test works is if you have too much income, and a simple rule would be like this. If you have no children and you're making over $80,000 a year in most counties in Michigan, that would create a problem with the means test. Correct, Brian?
Absolutely. Absolutely correct. It would require you to take the means test, and then if you fail it, which you're likely going to do with that type of income,
then you'd have to file a Chapter 13.
Or not file a bankruptcy at all.
Now, there's a big exception to this rule. What is it?
If the majority of your debts are non-consumer debts, then you don't have to take the means test.
All right, now, here's
which means that anybody can file a Chapter 7 as long as
what's a
their
non-consumer
debt is
debt?
non-consumer debt. Well, non-consumer debts, by example, would include income tax debt, which doesn't make any sense if you think about it logically,
No,
but it
it's
is
a non-consumer
true.
debt.
Business-related debt. That's it.
All right, and what would be a consumer debt?
Your personal use of credit cards, your mortgage, your car loans, your student loans.
What if the car is only used for your business?
Then in that case, then that would flow into the business side.
That's good. Now, the second question I asked you, I want to point this out to you, Brian. You didn't repeat my question when you answered it, which was good. Because the first time I asked you the question, you repeated the question. And if you repeat every question I ask you,
we're
going
to
run out of time. I'm just giving you a hard time. All right, so let's look at the numbers. Non-consumer versus consumer debt. The house and the mortgage is $110,000 and $25,000 on the second. They got $20,000 of personal credit cards, $30,000 in car loans. Their consumer debt is $185,000. Now let's look and see how much non-consumer debt Mike and Rita have and see if they meet this exception to get around the means test. They've got $100,000 in business credit card debt, $105,000 in income taxes, $20,000 in payroll taxes. That sums to, Trevor?
$225,000.
If you go to the next page on your outline, you'll see it's a lot easier. There you go. Okay, very good, Trevor. See, this is why we have Trevor's in Lansing, Michigan State, very numerical area. That's why he's right on top of his numbers there.
That's right.
All right, so the answer is we have more non-consumer debt than consumer debt. We do not have to worry about the means test. We're still eligible for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
That's correct. And this is the type of situation when I get this set of facts, and this is not uncommon, this is where I start to drool. Because there's so much that we can do for a client in this position.
Trevor,
it's
do you
incredible.
have a cup in case he starts
seriously.
drooling?
I mean, you take a look at this and you say, all right, now what do you do? And I get the great privilege of telling a client that they can pursue a Chapter 7.
And when we get to a second, we're going to talk about the mortgage next. When we talk about the tax debt, that's why you're drooling, is because we're going to get rid of almost all of this tax debt as well. Let's talk about the mortgage first, though. I want to go over what's dischargeable in bankruptcy, assuming now that we know we can file the case. What about the mortgage note, the obligation on this first and second mortgage?
When you enter into a mortgage and you buy a house, two things happen. You sign a mortgage and you sign a note. The mortgage is the lien on the property, and the note is your promise to pay. When you file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, effectively you destroy the I promise to pay you bank. Now, if you want to keep the house, you still have to pay for the house.
Because they have the lien on it and they'll foreclose if you don't make the payments.
But your personal obligation to pay the debt is
Goes
eliminated,
away.
which is great because here we have a house worth $65,000 that we owe $125,000 on. We may not want to stay in this house for the rest of our lives. $135,000. We may not want to stay in this house for the rest of our lives. And if we decide to stay there 5 years from now, it still may be underwater.
You can just give it away.
We can actually, at that point, you can close the door, turn off the lights, shut off the gas, and leave.
Or you could let it go through foreclosure and live there for free for a year and a half and then leave.
Absolutely.
Which is what sometimes you and I call getting your equity out the sneaky way. All right, so that's one good thing about the house. Now, before we jump off the house, I want to say, okay, suppose Mike and Rita like this house, and they're saying they'd like to be able to figure out a way of living there long term, but they're not happy with the mortgage payment. The mortgage payment on the house, let's assume, is $1,600 a month. The question is, would they be eligible for a loan modification, which can occur after the Chapter 7 if you want to try it, even and you don't become liable on the mortgage, but you can modify a mortgage after the bankruptcy. Well, the rule is this. You take 31% of gross monthly income, which in this case with Mike and Rita together, they have $130,000 of gross monthly income, or annual income. Divide that by 12, that's $10,833 a month. You multiply that by 31%, that equals $3,358. That's too much. Their current monthly payment is only $1,600, so they are not HAMP eligible.
No soup for you.
The rule is if your gross income times 31% is less than your current mortgage payment, which is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, then you are HAMP eligible and you could modify. If you're HAMP eligible, you have a chance under the current guidelines of obtaining principal reduction on the mortgage balance as part of the modification. It's not a guarantee, but it could happen. Now, in this case, on Mike and Rita, if they were both on the mortgage, they would not have a chance at getting principal reduction because they're not HAMP eligible. However, let's change the facts a little bit and let's assume only Mike was on the mortgage. Rita wasn't. At the time he had his landscaping business, he took out the mortgage. Rita was going to school to become a physician assistant. They got the mortgage based on his income. Well, Mike's now only making $40,000 a year. In that case, $40,000 divided by 12 is $3,333 a month times 31%. That equals $1,033. That's less than $1,600. He would be HAMP eligible. So if those were the facts, what would we do?
Well, first, in this situation, I'd put them through a Chapter 7. Then I would apply for the loan modification. And then I tell you there's something else we would do for this client, too.
What else?
I'm going to share that with you after.
No, you're not. You've got 30 seconds. Share it with me now, or else you're going to be banned
I'm going to
for life.
put them through a Chapter 13 after all this is done.
Why?
Because I'm going to get rid of their second mortgage.
All right. That's going to be it. We'll give you maybe a chance to explain that, but when we come back from the break, we're going to do announcements, and then we're going to talk about the tax liabilities on this.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. You call that a Chapter 20, don't you?
Yes, I do.
We'll be back after the break.
Are you struggling to pay your mortgage? Afraid of foreclosure and the financial mess it can cause? Time is not on your side. Call Alan Stalter, the short sale specialist. For years, Alan has been helping distressed homeowners navigate through the short sale process. His experience will get you out of your home without the credit score damage that follows foreclosure. If you want a fresh start, you need to call Alan Stalter, the short sale specialist, 248-854-3829. Or MetroDetroitShortSale.com.
Going from hourly to salary seemed like a good career move, but now you're working 60 hours a week instead of 40, and you aren't getting paid any of that extra time. You're stuck, right? Wrong. You can be on salary and still be entitled to overtime. If you've been wrongly denied such pay, you may be entitled to that and more. Gold Star Law is here to help you through your employment law problem, whatever it is.
Gold Star Law, protecting employees' rights. Call 1-800-WAGES-10 for a free consultation today.
Welcome back. All right, before we get back to Mike and Rita and we talk about the tax liabilities and what Brian was talking about with Chapter 20, which is for those math majors, Chapter 7 plus Chapter 13 equals Chapter 20. That's kind of, it's not really a chapter in bankruptcy. couple quick announcements. I already told you we're switching the name of the show to Law and Reality, so you can look forward to that. Reg X. Reg X is a new rule that came about January 10th. Federal law out of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau governs all first mortgages. Lenders must comply with it in order to foreclose. We have found that this new rule gives you great opportunity to buy time to manage a short sale, as well as to coerce the lender into giving you a loan modification if the rule is used the right way, and no one around knows how to use the rule the correct way because there's very little literature on it. Most of the lawyers aren't aware of it yet. We think it's a great rule. I wrote a report on it. It's a 10-page report. It's free. It's called How to Save Your Home with Regulation X, The Hidden Secrets. If you want a copy of it, here's how you get it. You go to the website, regxhomesaver.com, and then all you do is enter in your email address, and I email the report to you. It's in color and everything else. It's a good report. Take advantage of it. The Financial Crisis Analyzer is still operational. It's on our website, financialcrisistalkcenter.com. Gives you an analysis of what your options are if you're dealing with issues relative to credit card debt, student loans, tax problems, house underwater, behind on your mortgage. You enter your data. It's all private, doesn't go anywhere to anyone, and then it instantly sends you a report laying out your options. Absolutely free. It took me 3 years of work to develop it, and we've had it up and working this year, and a lot of people are enjoying it. I want to thank our sponsors, Gold Star Law, Samasco Law, Alan Stalter, Elite REO Services, Short Sale Specialist, Trips Auto Shop and Collision Center in Jackson, U.S. Staffing coming on board very shortly in Jackson and in Lansing, as well as Cardiology Associates of Michigan. Events. We've got a seminar coming up on June 4th. It is called Say No to Debt. A little bit trite, I would say, but just say no.
Just say no.
It's at our Bingham Farms office, 7 to 8:30 p.m. You want to sign up for that, go to thavgross.com or financialcrisistalkcenter.com, or you can do it the old-fashioned way and call 888-235-HELP. Seminars we're going to cover Reg X in detail. We're going to cover the new rules and new opportunities for solving tax problems. But the focus of the seminar isn't a crisis seminar. It's a brain seminar. Go back to what I said at the beginning of the show. Doesn't matter how much income you make. If you're sitting on $50,000, $40,000 of credit card debt, you need some advice as to how to get rid of it, because if you want to just keep paying the interest for the rest of your life, you could be putting that money away into a 401k or an IRA, tax deferred, and it could be growing and becoming a savings account and a retirement fund rather than just going to the profit of the credit card industry. All right, back to Mike and Rita. All right, so we talked about the mortgage. What about taxes? They've got a lot of taxes, Brian, and this is the question is, how do we get rid of this tax debt?
You start off with the simple rule. 3 years, 2 years, and 240 days.
Before you get to that rule, are all taxes dischargeable?
No, all taxes are not dischargeable. Income taxes are dischargeable.
So in this
certain
case,
types of penalties are dischargeable.
Mike's $20,000 of payroll taxes, those are not going to be dischargeable.
No, those are not dischargeable.
Okay, let's talk about his income, Mike and Rita's income taxes, because they have a lot of income tax liability.
His taxes, if you recall, were from the years 2008, 2009, 2010, 11, and 12. And if you basically start looking...
What's the rule?
3 years. Did the tax return come due at least 3 years ago?
Okay, next rule.
Have they been filed for at least 2 years?
And when you say that, there's a term that we talk about, and we've talked about on the show, be called an SFR, which is substitute for return.
Which is not a return.
I could give you another definition of what SFR stands for, but that would be the last radio or TV show we ever did.
Seriously.
But it's a substitute for return. When the government does the return for you, that does not count when it comes to getting rid of the taxes through a bankruptcy.
That's right. And if you go and subsequently file your return after the government has filed an SFR for you, you're still stuck.
That's SOL. Sorry,
Yes.
out of luck.
Because
sorry, out of luck.
The tax return is deemed to not be your actual filed tax return is not deemed to be a tax return for tax purposes.
What's the third rule?
240 days.
Which is almost always done.
Have you been assessed
All right,
within the 240 days before the filing of the bankruptcy.
So I'm going to, if you're watching the TV version of the show, I'm putting a chart up on the wall right now to show how this rule applies. 2008, the $50,000 of taxes due. 3 years from that would be April 15th, 2012. 2009, the $25,000 would be April 15th, 2013. That's 3 years from the due date. 2010 goes to 2014. 2011 taxes, the $10,000 that are due there, you have to get to 4/15/2015.
As long as you didn't file an extension, in which case you got to get to October 15,
Correct.
2015.
In 2012, you got to get to 4/15/2016.
What we have here is a quandary: is can we keep Mike and Rita? Can we keep the balls in the air, juggle for them till we get a year from now, or slightly less than a year?
You jumped ahead a little bit, but to stay right on that point is what Brian's already thinking ahead. We're saying, you go to some bankruptcy attorneys, and what they want to do is they want your money. So they're going to put you into that bankruptcy a week after you go into their office. That's not the right advice. What you want to look at and say is, if we can hold off the wolves, keep the tax problem under control, keep the creditors off your back, and wait until at least 4/15/2016 or 4/15/2015, another year, we can get rid of that 2011 tax liability. To get rid of the 2012 tax liability, we'd have to wait all the way to 2016. We wait, if we can, before we file, because what better deal is there than discharging it rather than paying it back? There's no better deal. So sometimes the right way, the strategy is to wait.
Patience is a virtue.
You got to be careful when it comes to waiting with the IRS, with the government. They can go after Rita's 401k, so you got to be careful. Sometimes you're able to wait, sometimes we're not. But when we analyze it, that's what we're looking for. All right, so that's where we're at on the income taxes. Most of them are dischargeable. The payroll taxes are not. Let me ask you the next question, Brian, Trevor. What assets do they get to keep? Wait, I forgot. Trevor, what about the credit cards? Do we get rid of those?
We get rid of the credit cards.
They're long gone. We're going to pay back nothing on those. Okay. What about assets? What about the 401k?
Keep it.
How can you keep it?
Because a 401k is an exempt asset in a bankruptcy. It's a retirement plan which is protected under the bankruptcy code.
You mean I can file a bankruptcy with $500,000 in my 401k
you can
and
file
keep it?
a bankruptcy with $1 million in your 401k and keep it.
That's pretty nice. Yeah. There is some limit, though, isn't there?
There are some interesting limits with regard to IRAs, but the majority, if not 99.99% of everybody, it doesn't matter.
What about the cash?
The cash is protected, too, because we can keep almost $12,000 some odd dollars in exemptions.
All right. That kind of wraps things up for the show. We will be back next week, and we'll do some concluding comments on the tax aspects on our next segment of the Financial Crisis Talk Center.